Hi, my name is Leah, and today I'm here with Radio Regent Climate Conversations. Today we have Alienor from Environmental Defense here with us. Hello, Alienor,
Hi, how are you doing?
and welcome to Climate Conversations on Radio Regent. It is a pleasure to have you take part in today's show. Could you start off with telling us a bit about yourself and share why you decided to pursue a career connected to the environment and climate?
Sure. So I'm a program manager with environmental defense. That means we can go into it after, but I do work both media relations, government relations, and public education to try to push for more ambitious climate action mostly. Before that, I was doing a lot of work in the youth climate strike movement, specifically with the Fridays for Future movement, which you might have heard of. Greta Thunberg is the one that made this movement quite popular. And I decided to go into this work. I mean, it's kind of been my life's work ever since I was a kid. I was concerned with human rights, and human rights tie very closely with climate justice and climate change. But I think specifically it's when I started realizing that we have the technical solutions, we have the ways to address the climate crisis, but what we don't have is politicians and decision makers willing to do it. And so it's really when I had this understanding of what was blocking that I felt like I needed to really be part of the pushers and the enablers and those that are pushing the government to do it. And that's why I chose this career.
That sounds great. Our other question is, can you tell me about environmental defense and your work with them?
Yeah, so environmental defense has been around for over 2 decades now, and it's a charity, a nonprofit, whose core role is to help communities have access to a safe, healthy environment. So of course that means, fighting climate change, making sure there's climate action, but it's also about fighting toxic pollution, chemical pollution, plastic pollution, safeguarding water, super important for us in Ontario, safeguarding the green belt. So kind of all these issues related to the environment and to climate. And as I was just saying, my work with them is really on the side of external communications and how do we help mobilize people, citizens, into pushing their governments for more climate action. This is really where we're focused.
Mm-hmm. All right. My other question is, in your opinion, what are some of the most important things individuals should know about climate change?
I think people really need to understand that it's not an environmental or a nature thing. I don't really consider myself like a nature person or an environmentalist. I consider myself a human rights defender and advocate, right?
Yeah.
But it's because climate change is going to change. It's going to negatively impact our health, our homes, our food, and our access to food. It's because of those things that I care. And I think people should really remember that. They should remember it's not a foreign nature problem. It's really a problem of are we going to be able to live good lives?
Mm-hmm.
How do you think we are doing as a society to resolve these issues?
I mean, pretty terribly, to be honest. But it's I think the reassuring thought is that we're not doing terribly because we're, trying our hardest, but all the solutions are just not working. We're doing terribly because we haven't really committed to trying the solutions we have. So right now we have a pretty good range of tools from renewable energies to nature-based solutions that can really help us address climate change, but we're kind of missing on putting the money and the resources behind having those. So that's where we're at. To give you a bit more precision, right now we're on track for average warming that's 2.5 degrees, maybe 3 degrees higher than pre-industrial level. Mm-hmm. We should be at like 1.5 maximum, and that's already pretty catastrophic.
Wow.
How could you get more people aware and involved in the climate crisis?
I think you got to know how to meet people where they're at. I mean, most people have really valid everyday concerns. Right now, we're having prices that are insanely high, and it's really hard to just, make ends meet. you have people that are worried about their security, about their health, about their kids' education after being, youth being out of school for so long. You have mental health issues. So you have to figure out how you can bring climate solutions that also address these issues. And until we kind of treat them as it's either climate or a good job, we're going to keep losing. But the day we show and we actually have clean energy that's also affordable energy, climate will kind of be a natural thing people want to be a part of.
So the other question is, what outcomes do you see if we don't take immediate action against the crisis?
That's the scary part, right? It's the outcomes, like, of course, on the global level, we're going to see the global South countries with immense disruption. I mean, I'm thinking back of the floods in Pakistan recently and how millions and millions of people were forcibly displaced. So we're going to see that. But even closer to us here, our food prices might be the first thing that we really notice, because when there's, unpredictable weather patterns, we can't grow the food properly. So there's one. Floods or forest fires. I mean, anybody that's in BC or in Alberta, anywhere in the prairies, knows that forest fires are a really real threat even right now, and they're going to accelerate. So I'm thinking those impacts are going to be the big ones. And then the scary longer term ones are around our health. A lot of scientists believe that bacteria and viruses are going to be able to spread much more with these changing weather patterns. We just went through a pandemic. We know what it's like to have a public health crisis, and it'd be frightening to get through another one.
What are most likely to be impacted by climate change? I believe you kind of answered that question.
Yeah, I mean, hinted at it, right? Of course, global South countries, which, by the way, are also least responsible for the climate crisis. So there's a big injustice there, of course. So we're talking about many countries on the African continent. We're talking about Southern Asia. We're talking about, but we're also talking about northern communities in Canada, folks that are in what we think of the far north in Canada. They're also going to be more affected. And then even in our cities or in the GTA, for example, it's people that live in houses that are not as well heated or cooled. So usually low-income communities, recent migrants. I mean, again and again, it's the people that are already suffering that will suffer the most from climate change.
Your organization's primary concerns revolved around working with the government to have nature protecting policies enacted upon, focus on the preservation of fresh water and creating a habitable space for humans to live in by working towards the minimization of air corrupting toxins. Could you explain why your organization focuses on such?
Yeah, that's a good summary, right? It's like working with governments to make sure communities are healthy. And the reason we focused on that is that we thought, okay, we could go and convince every single person that they have to do the right thing for the environment, for the planet. First of all, that would take a ton of time. And also, as I was saying, most people, it's not that they want to destroy the planet, it's that they have no other choice but to do something that's not sustainable. We take the car not because we want to, but because there's no GO train that goes to everywhere or whatever. So these things. So we thought, who has the power and the money? It's government. So we should, spend all our energy convincing government to make the system and the make life sustainable, and then people can just kind of live their life. We also decided not to just push industry specific big companies, although many other organizations do that. We decided not to do it because we thought you can convince a company, and then the second they do the right thing, the next one is going to do something bad again. And so again, if we have laws that make sure it's illegal to do some sort of pollutions, then just all companies are going to have to respect those rules.
How can people get started when fighting against climate change?
There's many ways. If you're first of all, you don't need to be the person that has a megaphone and is on TV and is like, that's the stereotype of we think of an activist, but actually, if we were all doing that, nothing would actually happen. So I'll give you the advice that it's more like thinking about your skills and the communities you're in, and then thinking, what impact can I do at that level? If you're already a talented, whether it's a writer or a musician or someone that's super detail oriented, so you kind of take your skills and you figure out with those, what can I do to push for more climate action? I'll give you some specifics. I know a few people that are part of a soccer group that are starting to just use that platform they have, because people like to watch the games, and they'll advocate for climate change. They'll talk about upcoming elections. They'll talk about key topics. Others are religious groups. There's a lot of groups. There's a lot of groups like faith-based groups. There's one in Toronto of Muslim environmentalists that will say, since we're all gathering regularly several times a week to talk about key topics, well, let's actually use it as a chance to talk about climate action and things we can all do. So it's really that, not trying to be the person that goes to parliament right away, but instead thinking, who are the people that I'm already interacting with every day? What can I do in that context?
What are some common decisions made by people that actually worsen the climate situation?
That's the hard part. I mean, there's the obvious ones, unfortunately, eating red meat, really bad for the planet. And I know it's hard to imagine. I mean, it feels so intangible. We're just feeding ourselves, and then it could be somehow bad for the planet. So these things, eating red meat, certainly when we take the car, or worse, take the plane, I mean, these things, very environmentally destructive. However, there's also things like voting for the wrong folks or not voting at all. That's actually almost worse, because you're not only saying, hey, I'm going to be bad directly for the environment, you're actually saying, I'm going to allow the whole country to be bad for it. So I was going to say, if you have to, focus on one thing you'll improve next year, instead of focusing on your meat consumption, try to make sure you or your family votes for the people that are actually going to put climate action. That'll lead us to a much better outcome.
How do you address individuals who deny the climate crisis?
Sometimes I choose not to address them at all. Not to, trying to be, funny or witty, but sometimes we have to remember that even though they're the loudest, they're actually a very, very small number. So if we just focus on the many people who believe in climate change, but just don't know what to do, and we help them find their role, I think we'll have solved enough of the problem that those kind of people that just want to oppose it for the sake of opposing it, they'll have to kind of adapt, and eventually it just won't work anymore. However, there's an exception, right? If it's people that have a lot of power, they might be CEOs, they might be in city council, they're investors, the people that have a lot of power and they're denying climate change, then I'll try to work with them on thinking about who has the money, following the money, right? That's often what we say when we're investigating something. And if you can show people that the science that proves climate change is real, they don't have anything else to sell than their science. These are experts that are just in search of the best science. Often those who deny climate change are people that have a polluting product to sell. They have oil and gas to sell, they have big gas guzzling cars to sell. So usually we'll try to say, follow the money, and realize, who has an interest in saying what, and that might help you find the truth a little more.
Thank you.
There was a recent conference, COP, which housed discussions on what way countries can address climate change. Are you hopeful that world leaders can rise to the challenge? Also, what do you think of the role of citizens are in advocating for change?
Yeah, COP27 was in Egypt, right? And it did some good things, like finally talking about global inequity and how rich countries that polluted have to give money to developing countries that are hurting because of climate change. So that was really good. And it gave me hope to see that they committed money to it. I'm not hopeful, though, that world leaders are going to naturally go there, have 2 weeks of meetings, and then solve the whole problem. Why? Because all these world leaders, most of these world leaders, are elected or at least accountable to people back home. And so they'll basically do what they think is less risky for them. If they feel like taking strong climate action is less risky and they're not going to get booted out, they'll do that. But most of them right now feel like it's actually risky to take strong climate action. So I'm glad your question had two parts, because your question gives us the answer. It's only when citizens, get super, super vocal about the fact that they want climate action that we're going to get it. And I'll say sometimes politicians are a little dense. They need you to tell them many times over and over in a very strong and diverse way that you want climate action. That's why, we'll have protests, but you also have ads in the newspaper, and you have podcasts, and you'll have, you know, like you have to have a variety of ways to make sure it gets to them.
So I believe that's like all our questions. So
thank you.
Thank you for like attending this meeting.
Yeah.
It was nice.
Yeah, my pleasure. It was great. Great to connect.
Yeah. And I learned a lot from this.
Yeah.
Like, there's some stuff I had no idea about. I learned a lot, and yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks for this. And yeah, happy to stay in touch if ever you want to follow up, or if you guys personally want to ever talk about finding climate careers.
Yeah.
Have a good night.
Thanks a bunch. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and check out all of our social media platforms. For more information, check out our website.